I'd like to declare the meeting open and advise that due to the city's live streaming policy, those people in the audience are consenting to have their face or voice live broadcast. Could I call upon the Deputy Mayor to welcome us to country?
Thank you, Worship. I'll begin by acknowledging my elders past and present. Ngalak yini kuro ngala nois nejin nonga buja. Nonga mo jerpen nejin and kwabarak nonga buja kurolong. From the beginning of time to the end, this is Noongar country. Noongar people have been graceful keepers of our nation for many, many years. Yini karajin jerpen nejin wern nonga buja ngala maya border. We ask you look, listen, understand, and embrace all the elements of Noongar country. This is our home. Kaiwan Yungan Ko Jerpen Nija Noongar Buja Darsli Wangi Noongar Buja. Hello and welcome, artists. Happy as we gathered here and meeting on Noongar country tonight. Thank you.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here, and before commencing proceedings, I would like to also acknowledge that we come together tonight on the traditional land of the Noongar people, and pay our respects to elders past and present. Could I call upon Councillor Brown to read the dedication?
Thank you, Your Worship. May we, the elected members of the City of Kwinana, have the wisdom to consider all matters before us with due consideration, integrity and respect for the Council Chamber. May the decisions made be in good faith and always in the best interest of the greater Kwinana community that we serve.
Attendance, apologies, leave of absence previously approved is nil. Public question time is nil. Do councillors have a petition or presentations? There are no deputations. Confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of February 2025. Is there any additional information? Councillors have any questions? Moved. Deputy Mayor, seconded. Councillor Rouse. Either councillors wish to speak? Speak against? Put to the vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. Declaration of interest by members and city officers. I would like to declare an interest in item 18.3, the proposed disposition of Suite 1 of Darius Wells Library due to the Kwinana Early Years, as I'm the chair of the board.
And I'd like to declare an impartial interest with this, as well as I'm the co-chair, the vice chair of the board.
Is there any other declaration of interest from Councillor Sargent?
Just a clarifying point, Mayor Feasy. I just want to confirm in the item 17.1, the area that I live in is specifically highlighted in that local scheming plan. Is that something that I would need to declare? Okay, thank you.
No other declarations? Would someone like to move that way? Do we have to accept that? No. Sorry. Little moment there. Request of leave of absence. No? That's unusual. Nothing on item 10, nothing on item 11. Item 12.1, 12.2, 12.3, 12.4 and 12.5. I propose that we move on block. Do councillors have any objections? Question? Yep. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on item 12.1, it mentions that in relation to the item in the Audit and Risk Committee recommendation, and it says Public Sector Commission Integrity Education Thematic Review Status. And in this item, it mentions that in response to being unable to, I guess, automate the transfer of incident reporting data between systems, that the city is now developing a permanent manual solution to this process. Could the city talk, I guess, from a data governance perspective, kind of the best use of kind of ratepayer funds? Is the manual process kind of the best outcome here over a automated process? Could the city talk to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So it's basically just a spreadsheet just to record the data in this particular case, rather than doing a modification to a system which is not particularly suited to it. So in this case, it's probably the most efficient way to do it.
Okay. So there's, for example, not a case where a large portion of someone's role is manually transferring data for this.
No, this is mainly related to staff in terms of public integrity.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions in relation to any of those items? Could someone move that way, that we move those 5 items on block? Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Wood. Would either councillors wish to speak? Councillor, anyone speak against? I'll put those 5 items to the vote. All in favour? Against? Motion carried. Nothing on item 14, 15 or 16. 17, local planning scheme number 4, adoption for advertising. Is there any additional information, Mr. CEO?
Nothing further, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, have any questions? Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mayor Feasy. Okay, on page 118 of item 17.1, in the first paragraph, could you just give some clarity to the term upcode, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, upcode's a general sort of planning term that refers to increasing the density code. So, for example, from say R20 to R40, it would allow a number of properties to be subdivided, for example, under R40 coding. What this scheme is proposing, local planning scheme 4, is not to do that sort of blanket upcoding approach to provide for more housing opportunities.
Okay, thank you. Can I please ask some more questions on this?
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor Feasy. Also on page 118, under the title of land use, can you please speak to what the timelines on the regulations are to be amended? That it says that at this time it's expected to happen prior to gazettal. Is there any more information you can give us to that, please?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, not at this point. No, the consistent local planning schemes report was published, I think last year, and the intention was that that would be then packaged up into the next round of regulation changes. I'm not aware of a time frame on that at this stage.
You can.
Thank you, Mayor Feasy. On page 100 and, is it 35 or 36? On page 135 in the land use table, you have corrective institution and that is not allowed anywhere in the city of Kwinana. The city of Kwinana is currently host to the Casuarina prison. So does that make it that would be a non-conforming land use, and that if anything ever happened, such as it burnt down, it could never be erected again in that space?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, the Casuarina prison's on a metropolitan region reserved piece of land, which is not governed by this local planning scheme. So, because that's a MRS reservation, that land use table doesn't apply in that instance. The non-permissibility that the local planning scheme 4 is proposing is that there isn't an appropriate zone in Kwinana for another corrective institution.
Thank you, Mayor Feasy. Okay, on page 139, 17 point, so is there any chance regarding when it talks about under point 6, that's at the top heading, that the council must regard a structure plan and a local development plan, should there not also be a point regarding that the council considers community amenity, as has come up with other situations? Is that something that we would speak to or be able to add?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, community amenity or various factors are considered in the determination of a planning application, they're covered in a separate. So the way the scheme operates is we have our local planning scheme, but then there's also a deemed provisions part of the scheme, which is set under regulation. The two documents sort of sit side by side. So the deemed provisions include a very extensive list of matters to be considered by the decision maker in determining a development application. So aspects around impact on amenity or whether the proposal sits within the streetscape, environmental factors, all those sorts of things are covered in the deemed provisions document, which don't need to be replicated in the local planning scheme.
Why not?
Thank you, Mayor Feasy. So we're on page 141, point 23, 1C. I'm quite concerned about this particular point in the scheme. I will give you an example. There is a home on Homestead Ridge that was burnt down. That particular property was sold. A new person has purchased that. They were unable to build the home that was historically on
Sorry,
that.
Councillor Sargent, you're actually not technically asking a question. You're
Okay.
kind of getting into a debate about the.
Sorry, my
So
question.
maybe just frame it as a question.
Okay.
With no
My
preamble.
question is that when you're saying that if 75% or more of its value has been destroyed, it is removed from its non-conforming land use, what is to protect our ratepayers that have built under the historic plan that now would be a non-conforming use if there was, for example, a bushfire that went through a large proportion of our community, that they would then potentially be underinsured because they would not be able to build their home in the same way that it was historically there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, what this clause, I probably first to explain, the text in the scheme that we've drafted, the texts that are in black font, like this clause here, are taken from what's called the model scheme text or model provisions that sit under the planning regulations. It's expected that local planning schemes will include those model provisions without altering them. If we're to alter them, we have to sort of come up with specific reasons why that would be the case. So that's, I suppose, the context to this clause. It's not drafted by us, it's from the sort of model provisions, and it'd be the same in most modern or contemporary schemes. So in terms of a non-conforming use, if in the situations that you sort of described where a property is burnt down or those sorts of things, firstly it would have to be a non-conforming use, so that would be a use that's otherwise not permitted in that zone. If a bushfire came through residential areas, well, all those single dwellings or single houses, they're all permissible uses in that zone, so they don't need to get approval again. If you had, say, a service station, for example, in a residential zone, and it's a X use in that residential zone, if that service station was destroyed by fire or whatever, it cannot automatically reactivate that approval to continue using. What this clause says is that a person must not, without development approval, use the land if the building has been destroyed 75% or more. So you can still actually do it, but with development approval.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor Feasy. So from my understanding of what you have just said, how then, if you have, say, Homestead Ridge is now going to be R Code 5 under this plan, and the development approval, the current regulations to what was 30 years ago when that was built, how can we protect our ratepayers in our community to know, like, is there any way for us to add an addendum or to the city of, because from, sorry, I'm just trying to think of how best to frame my question. Is there any way, I guess, to protect our ratepayers from an instance where, because I believe this document overarches local law, to ensure that that is not something that the City of Kwinana 20 years down the track could implement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the zoning is proposed to change for Homestead Ridge from, I think it's a special residential zone now, which is no longer a zone that you can use in a local scheme, to just residential with the density coding of R5, so very low density. That won't change the permissibility of the existing houses there, so a dwelling is a permitted land use currently. It will still be a permitted land use under the new zoning. So this clause, this section of the scheme won't be applicable to that area. Some of the development standards may change slightly, but what we're proposing is that in the scheme that any sort of building envelopes that have already been approved and apply to the land within that Homestead Ridge will continue to apply under the operation of this scheme.
Thank you, Mayor Feasey. So with that explanation, you have in this document, it talks about the required boundaries for building envelopes. So if, for example, a ratepayer had a house that was within 2 metres of a boundary fence of their building envelope was, their house burnt down, under this scheme, does that then mean they can build their house in the same historic building envelope, or that because that would not be under non-conforming, they would need to apply to a new building envelope?
Through Mr. Mayor, the approved building envelope will still apply, but what we're proposing in the scheme is that there's a process by which you can apply to amend your building envelope, and then there's some parameters around how that would be assessed. So the original building envelope would still apply, but there is a process where if they wanted to amend that, that they could follow through that process, which would be the same sort of process as applying for a development application or development approval.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess part of the document is there's a section around the modification of the R codes, and that's in the context of, I guess, continuing the Homestead Ridge example, I guess, catering to the unique characteristics of the area. When it comes to the WA Planning Commission, do those modifications to R codes typically go through kind of unchallenged? Is it kind of standard practice to use that approach for this purpose?
Through the Mayor, I wouldn't say they go through unchallenged. They need to be justified, the modifications to the R codes, but there's certainly plenty of schemes that have been gazetted and approved recently that have that section where the R codes are modified to cater for local character or specific needs within that locality. So yeah, it certainly needs to be justified, but there are plenty of examples where schemes are being gazetted with modifications.
Okay, I'm just noting, I guess it's quite a long journey that this will go through, and wouldn't want to see a situation where, I guess, those efforts are then kind of removed when it comes back to council, and then we're probably in a worse situation than we are when we began. So, but good to hear that it's been done elsewhere.
Councillor Sargent?
Thank you, Mayor Feasey. With the definition of the non-conforming land uses, could you please speak to the City of Kwinana's, I guess, process of how you capture those non-conforming land uses to create the register? And is there any period of, I guess, advertisement that we ensure that in case the city is unaware of a use that has been operating, that they don't get, I guess, lost in translation in the implementation of this?
Through Mr. Mayor, the way we haven't prepared the register of non-conforming uses yet. How we're intending to tackle that is, if council adopt the scheme at the moment, it will then be sent to the West Australian Planning Commission for their assessment before we can advertise it, and also the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. We expect that to be at least a 9-month process. So, and in our sort of work plan is we will then use that time to go through all our records and identify some of the uses that will become non-conforming through if the scheme is gazetted and through the zoning changes. We've already, when I said we haven't prepared the register, we've already got quite an extensive list of those non-conforming uses, and it's not extensive, but we've identified sort of some of the areas. So then the process, what we're proposing to do is, once we're satisfied with that list, those, when we proceed to advertising, those property owners will get a customised specific letter to them, identifying, saying that this is the change in zoning to your property, and this is the result. This is what the implications will be. So we'll be seeking, that specific feedback from those owners affected by those changes.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Your Worship. And in the additional site and development requirements, the city has inserted, in relation to a number of areas, a clause saying that I guess if you remove a vegetation habitat, then you have to replace with equal or greater. What levers does the city have to, I guess, pull when it comes to mature trees that can't be so easily replaced after the fact? Is the way to read this that you can simply clear the block and replace kind of with seedlings, or does the city have other ways to protect mature trees which will take 50, 100 years to get to where they were?
Through the Mayor, no, I wouldn't say you can clear the block and then replace it with seedlings. There's some other sort of criteria in that section around where you need to develop whilst protecting sort of environmental sort of values and things like that. But where I suppose that impact can't be addressed, that provision is put in there to give us, I suppose, a head of power to require some, replanting or a 2-for-1 sort of tree situation. The intent, the scheme will be, as with most modern sort of planning frameworks now, the actual schemes are sort of stripped back to some really clear, succinct sort of criteria, but then it's quite important to have your local planning policy framework that sits underneath the scheme to provide that sort of greater guidance to the decision maker around these sorts of situations. So these are the sort of areas we'll be working on over the next couple of, year, I suppose, 18 months, whilst the scheme's being assessed at the Commission, is preparing that policy framework to then support the implementation of the scheme. So that area will certainly be one that we're looking at.
Yeah. So I guess for anyone who's reading this, it shouldn't be interpreted as you can clear your block entirely as long as you replace it with something that could grow over X amount of time.
No, absolutely not.
Cool.
No.
Councillor Sargent?
Thank you, Mayor Feasy. On page 175, could you please clarify the understanding when you talk about the DCA costs that are charged to the landowner, and it talks about over time looking at how that is implemented. Does this mean that after their development purchase, is that the developer would charge the ratepayer if those have been adjusted, or that's the amount is set at the time of development?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, the cost contributions are reviewed annually, or thereabouts, by the city, and if the cost contribution liability is triggered but for a development, once they pay that cost contribution in full, that's their full and final discharge of that amount. So there's no ability to sort of go back and adjust either way.
You can have one more. That's it. No more. Oh, Councillor Kearney has got one. Councillor Kearney.
Hey, I just wanted to ask, so in here we've got to provide sites for privately owned and operated recreation institutions and places of worship. Does that mean we're going to sort out where we're going to have places of worship rather than have it out at Wandie or Casuarina or, because we had that recent one that so we're looking at somewhere we can have that sort of thing?
Yeah, through the mayor, that zone is a new zone that's sort of been brought in by the regulations. It's not a commonly sort of used zone in old schemes, but the way we've approached it is there's only a couple of sites, I think, from memory, where we've identified like a private, because it covers private schools as well, I think.
So would that be included? Does that have a place of worship? Because generally they do go
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
Not we wouldn't be looking to apply it for the place of worship in Bourne Road. That's a permissible use within the rural zone.
Yeah,
so
that-
that's I think
I think is how we felt about it. That's not the type of area that we would prefer to have a place of worship. Somewhere like Mandogalup or somewhere like that could be pointed out as a
Yeah.
place to.
It's been a
possible?
very long time, I think, since planning schemes have tried to plan for places of worship. It's not common at all. The approach is more so that a place of worship is a permissible use in a variety of zones. So it's a discretionary use. It will require approval, but whilst this zone is possible, the only place we've applied it is for the Peter Carnley school, which is a private school.
Yeah.
Not trying to pick out individual sort of church or place of worship sites and applying it in that manner, which I think is fairly consistent with what other schemes are doing.
So if somewhere else wanted to go into Casuarina or those type of areas where it's more for rural type of settings, could that be discouraged in any way, or we just don't have a say?
I think ultimately that's your perception. That's not necessarily the way that the Planning Act is put over it. It's the same as the argument of density or how many stories we're going to allow in this area. Like, well, you might not want to live in a one-bedroom unit, but
Yeah.
someone out there does, and the developer wants to build it. So, and that's obviously what the scheme is there to do.
Okay. Thanks, Brett.
Councillor Sargent, your last question.
Thank you, Mayor Feasy, and also, thank you, Brett, for your patience in helping me have understanding. Okay, on page 179, item 4.1, could you just give me some clarification that what happens if past the period of 15 years from the date of gazettal, does that mean that the DCA funds need to be spent on what they're allocated by that time, or just the meaning of that sentence, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a good question. This scheme, or the current scheme, sorry, LPS2, has actually needed to extend that date at least on one occasion that I'm aware of, where there's still a substantial amount of vacant land within the DCA that hasn't been developed. So the provisions still continue to operate in the scheme. An amendment to the scheme has been approved that extends that amount. It hasn't really been sort of tested. Doug, do you have any sort of experience in that? If a payment hasn't been made for vacant land within a development contribution area, even if the plan expires, that still remains as a liability. So there's still the ability for the city to collect the amount. in terms of the expenditure of funds collected in that, well, that'll be determined by the capital sort of expenditure plan that sits behind this. So it's look, we haven't needed to cross that bridge yet, where we've had a plan expire, but we still need to administer it. What we've done is we've amended that clause to extend the operation of the plan.
Do we have a mover? Moved, Councillor Acker, seconded, Councillor Sargent. Councillor Acker, would you like to speak on the item? No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mayor Feasy. I can see, considering how long this document has been in the works, that there is extensive preparation. I really appreciate the council's transparency in asking these questions, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the regulatory bodies come back with before it goes to community consultation, and to make the city aligned with what is required in the local planning scheme to be compliant. I understand the extensive amount of work and appreciate the work that your team and every team that's been part of it has put into this. So thank you very much.
Anyone speak against? No? Put to the vote. All in favour? Against? Motion carried. I will also just add some comments. I think just acknowledge the efforts of the staff, certainly the efforts of the former director, Maria Cook, and our current planning manager and acting director of city development. This is something that's been a long time in the process. I believe we started talking about this around 2017, I think it was. But as you'll note, the existing scheme was gazetted in 1998. So it's well and truly overdue for renewal. So again, well done to the staff, and it's obviously only the beginning of the process. So there's quite a bit of time we'll take to get to the end, but we're on track. So. Item 18.1, reappointment of presiding member and deputy presiding member, audit and risk, and Woolamara. Don't believe there's any additional information. Councillors have any questions? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report, I guess, calls out that this is quite an administrative matter that we are going through this particular vote here. I'm just conscious that council is being asked to appoint a role, for example, with the Audit and Risk Committee for the presiding member and deputy presiding member, without, I guess, having an understanding of who these people are or their background, especially those who aren't on the Audit and Risk Committee. This is in contrast, for example, to the Woolamara, where everyone in the room is very well aware of the deputy mayor's credentials, for example. So could the city speak to, I guess, the background of the individuals for the Audit and Risk Committee that we are looking to, I guess, endorse?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. There's a couple of points to that. So the first thing is the terms of reference, which we have for the Audit and Risk Committee, specifies that the chair should be an independent member, then also the deputy as well, which then acts. The local government reforms have also reinforced that the chair should be is to be an independent member from the Audit and Risk Committee. So that's sort of the overarching requirements. In terms of the members which are being put forward, so Gai McMath has a long history in governance. So she's currently, for instance, just been elected as the Chancellor of ECU. She's on a number of boards. She's a chartered accountant. She worked at the City of Perth when they went into administration.
She's one of the commissioners appointed.
So she was one of the commissioners there. So has a very strong background in governance, risk, and financial accounting. Ben Arnold is the second of our independent members. Ben is the one that probably asks more questions than a current councillor.
Oh, I should not have looked, sorry. Apologies.
He is an auditor by background, specialising in internal audits and also risk. So he has a real focus around the risk part. Gay's been on the Audit and Risk Committee for a number of years, and Ben's been on there now for three years.
I also know that Mr. Arnold has indicated that he won't be seeking a further term.
Yeah, so that will be, we'll look to advertise that towards the end of the year. So when we go through council elections, we've got to reappoint. So that's sort of the background to those people. So extremely well qualified and add a lot of value to the Audit and Risk Committee.
Thank you very much. Appreciate, I guess, the information there, and probably adding to that they have been voted by the Audit and Risk Committee to those positions. In the future, post local government election, would council be presented with, I guess, profiles of individuals for us to formally appoint, I guess, to support the decision making?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the process going forward, so up until now, they've been appointed by the committee. But going forward, under the local government reforms now, we have to do it through council. So when we do it, so we'll align it to when obviously we have to reappoint people to it. So we will provide a background as to the people, because you're really choosing one of the two independent members. So you'll get a bio on their background, skills and competencies.
Cool, thank you.
Someone like to move that way? Moved Councillor Sargent, seconded Councillor Wood. Would either councillors wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor Feasy. As someone that's had the pleasure to work with Gay and Ben, I have not managed to attend one of the advisory committees, but Deputy Mayor Winmar and Paul are both upstanding members of the Indigenous community, so it's an honour to be part of the process of formalising that these are the people that are chair and deputy chair of these vital City of Kwinana organisations. Thank you.
Councillor Wood. Anyone like to speak against? Put to the vote. All in favour? Against? Motion carried. Item 18.2, proposed disposition by way of lease suite 10, Darius Wells. Any additional information? Councillors have any questions? Someone like to move that way? Moved Councillor Rouse, seconded Councillor Acker. Would either councillors wish to speak? Anyone speak against? Put to the vote. All in favour? Against? Motion carried. Item 18.3, I declared an interest of impartiality, as so did the Director of City Life. Proposed disposition of Suite 1, Darius Wells, to Kwinana Early Years. Is there any additional information?
Nothing further, Mr. Mayor.
Questions? Someone move that way. Moved Councillor Wood, seconded Councillor Rouse. Would either councillor wish to speak? Anyone speak against? Put to the vote. All in favour? Against? Motion carried. Item 18.4, monthly financial report, January 25. Is there any additional information? No. Councillor Sargent, do you have any questions? Of course.
Thank you, Mayor Feasy. On page 288, I think it's 288, yes, in the table down the bottom, is there a reason that we have, under the portfolio credit and risk, it says AAA and Bendigo Bank Kwinana Community Bank branch, but there are no funds held? Is it something that it's here because we have an intention to bank with Bendigo Bank?
That's just through Mr. Mayor, so that's just what's at this point in time. So we can hold funds with it. We have held funds previously. It's basically, it comes down to whether what the interest rate they're offering at that point in time.
You have one more question.
I have two. Thank you, Mayor Feasy. On page 290, could you please give us an update on the FERs that are not being paid? So there's ones that say they're registered with the Fines Enforcement Registry, but they have no other comments in the status. And I noticed there is a $38,463 amount.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have the specific details on that one. It is a planning prosecution. I don't have the details on that, so I'll have to take that one on notice.
Through you, Mayor Feasy, my final question. On page 292, I've noticed you can see that the one item that's highlighted in red for being over 100%, the John Wellard Community Centre annual internal painting program, was that the increase in costs, is that due to building damage that you've had to go back and paint, or it's just that the contractor cost considerably more than it normally does? Are we aware?
Yeah, it's John Wellard.
It's John Wellard.
Yeah, through the chair, we estimate as part of putting the budget together, and as we spoke earlier, we do manage the whole budget as a program to make sure we land these things on target by the end of the financial year. So what it'll be is when we've gone and quoted up the price, it was a bit more complex than we first thought when we estimated. So that is the price to do the work, but over the whole painting program, it will still come in across the program on budget.
Would someone like to move? Oh, sorry, any other questions? Someone like to move the report? Move, Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Wood. Either councillors wish to speak? Speak against? Put to the vote, all in favour? Against? Motion carried. There's nothing on 19. Nothing on item 20. Is there any late or urgent business?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Reports of elected members. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. On 24th of Feb, attended the South Metro Olga Zone meeting. It was in Fremantle. 27th of February, the newly formed Early Years Steering Group in relation to the Early Years GAP program and an analysis that's currently been undertaken. And today, the Wolga State Forum and State Council meeting just prior to tonight's meeting. But thank you, Worship.
Councillor Acker?
Nothing to report, thank you.
Councillor Brown? Are you sure? Councillor Kearney? Councillor Penny?
Thank you. On the 24th of February, I attended my first board meeting of the Gilmore College Board. I met with the new principal, Matthew Patton, and yeah, it's pretty exciting times for Gilmore College, and yeah, I'll keep you posted how those meetings go throughout the year. Thank you.
Councillor Rouse?
Nothing to report, Your Worship.
Councillor Sargent?
Nothing to report, Mayor Feasy.
Councillor Wood?
I've performed all those duties required of me, and a few days before Clean Up Australia Day, I joined in with council staff to go out and pick up rubbish in the town centre in about 5 or 6 hot spots that have been selected. And we only went out for an hour and we managed to get 22 kilo of rubbish.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. This item 23 is nil. Mayoral announcements. Nothing significant over the last 2 weeks. There are no confidential items. I declare the meeting closed at 6:44. Thank you for your attendance.